In the endless sea of human history, there are moments, small, quiet, yet thunderous in meaning, that pierce through time like beams of divine light. Every now and then, a piece of ancient writing emerges from the dust and whispers a truth so compelling, so powerful, that scholars, believers, and skeptics alike must stop and listen. This video is about one such whisper, a rare historical jewel, a testimony from a man who lived while Christianity was being born, a voice from the very century Jesus walked the earth. His name? Flavius Josephus, a Jewish historian, a scholar, a man deeply entrenched in politics, religion, and the drama of the ancient world. And yet from his pen comes a description of Jesus so striking, so aligned with the gospel, yet written by a man outside the Christian faith, that it continues to astonish the world nearly 2,000 years later. Before we journey into this extraordinary account, if you love discovering ancient evidence, biblical archaeology, and historical truth that strengthens faith, make sure you subscribe. What we're uncovering today is not myth, not legend, but recorded history from those who lived closest to the events that changed eternity. Now, let's step back into the first century, the world of Josephus, a first-century witness. Flavius Josephus was born in Jerusalem around AD 37, just a few short years after the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus Christ. He was not a fisherman or wandering preacher. He was not part of the early church. He was not a follower of the Messiah. Josephus was a scholar, raised in a priestly Jewish household, trained in scripture, politics, law, and debate. As a young man, he joined the Pharisees, the same religious group that often clashed with Jesus during his ministry. He later became a military leader during the Jewish revolt against Rome, a revolt that would end in tragedy when the Romans crushed Jerusalem and destroyed the Holy Temple in AD 70. Captured, Josephus did something unusual. He offered service to Rome. The Roman general Vespasian, who would soon become emperor, accepted him. And so Josephus lived out his life in Rome, writing detailed histories of the Jewish people and the events of his time. Two of his greatest works are The Jewish War Antiquities of the Jews. These writings give us a vivid window into first-century life, the culture, religion, politics, and turmoil surrounding the early Christian era. And hidden in Antiquities of the Jews, Book 18, lies a passage that would echo through time like a trumpet blast, the testimony that shook the world. In this ancient work, Josephus writes a short yet astonishing paragraph. It is now known as the Testimonium Flavianum, the testimony of Flavius. Listen carefully. Now there was about this time Jesus, a wise man, if it be lawful to call him a man, for he was a doer of wonderful works, a teacher of such men as received the truth gladly. He drew over to him both many of the Jews and many of the Gentiles. He was the Christ. And when Pilate, at the suggestion of the principal men among us, had condemned him to the cross, those that loved him at the first did not forsake him, for he appeared to them alive again the third day, as the divine prophets had foretold. And the tribe of Christians, so named from him, are not extinct to this day. Stop for a moment. Read it again if you need to. These are not the words of a Christian evangelist. These are not taken from the New Testament. They come from a Jewish historian writing for the Roman world. And yet Josephus acknowledges Jesus existed. He performed remarkable works. He taught truth. He gathered both Jews and Gentiles. He was crucified under Pontius Pilate. His followers claimed he rose on the third day. His movement continued afterward. This is not legend. This is not late church tradition. This is first-century historical testimony. A non-believer who could not ignore Jesus, Josephus, never became a Christian. He had no personal religious motive to promote Jesus. In fact, as a Pharisee-educated Jewish historian serving Rome, one might expect him to avoid Jesus entirely or dismiss him, but he didn't. Why? Because in Josephus's world, the story of Jesus could not be ignored. Everyone knew about the miracles, the crowds, the crucifixion, the claims of resurrection, the explosive rise of the early church. Jerusalem was not a sprawling metropolis. It was a tightly connected, politically charged city. When Jesus preached, healed the sick, drove out demons, and confronted corrupt leaders, Word spread everywhere. Josephus lived among the very people who witnessed these events. He grew up in the shadow of Christ's ministry, just a few years after the empty tomb. So when he wrote his history, he included him, not as a myth, not as a rumor, but as a real historical figure. More than Josephus, other ancient voices. Josephus is powerful, but he is not alone. Other non-Christian writers mention Jesus in the early Christians. Tacitus, a Roman senator, wrote that Christus was executed under Pontius Pilate during the reign of Tiberius. Suetonius, another Roman historian, referred to early Christians in Rome. Pliny the Younger wrote about followers of Christ worshiping him as God. None of these men were Christians, yet they confirmed what Scripture proclaimed. Jesus is not a myth. He is rooted in human history, prophecy, history, and a reluctant witness. What makes Josephus's passage extraordinary is not only that it matches the gospel narrative, but that it echoes ancient prophecy. The prophet Isaiah wrote, "He was wounded for our transgressions, and by his stripes we are healed." Isaiah 53:5. King David wrote in Psalm 16, "You will not allow your Holy One to see decay." Josephus, likely without intending to, reflects the same truth proclaimed by Scripture: a suffering Messiah, executed for others, dead, yet proclaimed alive again, followed by a thriving community of believers. This convergence between history and prophecy is not coincidence. It is divine fingerprint. Why this matters for faith? Some claim there is no evidence for Jesus outside the Bible. Josephus answers that claim with ink and parchment. His testimony stands as a bridge between sacred scripture and secular history. It is a reminder that the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus were not obscure rumors. They were known, spoken of, and written down by those who lived closest to his time. Even secular historians today acknowledge Jesus lived. He was crucified under Pilate. His followers believed he rose again. You don't need blind faith. You need open eyes. History whispers his name. Prophecy declares his mission. Eyewitnesses sealed it with their lives. And Josephus, not a Christian, not a preacher, but a historian, adds his voice to the chorus. A legacy that still speaks nearly 2,000 years later. Josephus's testimony has not faded. It continues to be read, debated, and respected. And with every line, it points to a truth the world cannot escape. Jesus was real. Jesus lived. Jesus changed history. The Apostle Peter wrote, "We did not follow cleverly invented stories, but were eyewitnesses of his majesty." 2 Peter 1:16. Josephus was not one of those eyewitnesses, but he was a witness to the world they shaped. And in recording Jesus' life, he left behind a historical echo that still strengthens faith today. Closing the testimony of Flavius Josephus is not just a historical footnote. It is a powerful reminder that the Jesus we worship today is not myth nor imagination. He walked among us. He taught. He healed. He was crucified. His tomb was found empty. His followers proclaimed his resurrection and would die before denying it. This is history intertwined with eternity. As Jesus himself declared, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." John 14:6. Truth always leaves evidence. History remembers, and Josephus, perhaps unknowingly, became one of the great witnesses of truth. Thank you for journeying with us today through faith and history. If you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe and join us again as we continue uncovering powerful discoveries that bring Scripture to life. Until next time, may the peace of Christ be with you.